He never thought I would be the kind of woman who agreed to live with a man everyone else quietly warned me about. Not loudly, not dramatically, just those small pauses people make when they're trying to decide how honest they're allowed to be with you, the kind of silence that stretches half a second too long, followed by a soft, careful sentence like, you know, he's a little different. Different is a polite word. Americans are very good at that. We soften things. We wrap danger in manners. We call storms bad weather and emotional chaos complicated. Back then, my name was Claire Dawson, 31 years old, divorced, emotionally tired in a way sleep doente fix, working long hours at a mid-sized insurance firm in a quiet corner of Northbridge, a town that looks peaceful enough to convince you nothing bad ever happens there. That's usually how trouble starts. I met Ethan Hale on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like every other Tuesday they ever lived through. Sammy burned coffee. Sammy officer that smelled faintly of printer ink and regret. Sammy feeling that my life had somehow shrunk without me noticing. He walked in because he needed to update a beneficiary form. That was it. No dramatic entrance. No lightning. No music swelling in the background. Used to men standing there, holding paperwork like it weighed more than it should. It looked normal. That was the strange part. No wild eyes. No unsettling smile. Just tired, in the way someone looks when they've been holding themselves together for too long and are starting to run out of strength. When I asked him routine questions, he answered slowly, thoughtfully, like he was choosing each word with care. Not nervous. Not confused. Used deliberate. At one point, I joked, something light, something automatic, and he smiled, but only with half his mouth, as if smiling fully might cost him something he couldn't afford. You're very serious about paperwork, I said. He looked up at me then, really looked at me, and said, paper doente la. People do. He laughed, because that felt like the correct response, but something about the way he said it stayed with me long after he left. A week later, he came back. This time, he brought coffee. Not the bitter office kind. Real coffee, warm, slightly sweet, exactly the way I liked it without me ever telling him. That's either very thoughtful, I said, or deeply unsettling. Is shrugged. I pay attention. That should have been my first warning. We started talking. First about nothing, then about things that mattered more than we expected. About loneliness that doesn't announce itself. About the strange pressure to appear fine when you're anything but. About how sometimes being strong just means not falling apart in public. It told me people thought he was unstable. Not jokingly. Not defensively. Used as a fact. I was hospitalized once, he said, stirring his coffee slowly. After my wife died. He didn't ask how she died. He didn't need to. Los carries its own weight, regardless of the details. They say I process things differently, he continued. That I fixate. That I don't let go when I should. He looked at me then, carefully, like he was waiting for me to flinch. He didn't. Maybe that was my mistake. Or maybe that was the moment everything else became inevitable. Over the next few months, Ethan became present in my life. Not aggressively. Not possessively. Used consistently. He remembered things I forgot Ethan mentioned. He noticed when I was tired before I admitted it. He listened in a way that made silence feel safe instead of awkward. When my rent went up unexpectedly and my landlord refused to negotiate, Ethan offered a solution so casually it almost slipped past me. You could stay with me, he said. Just until you figure things out. He hesitated. Northbridge is small. People talk. And they had opinions about Ethan Hale. He lived alone in a house on the edge of town, one they inherited after his wife's death. People said he barely left it. That he talked to himself. That sometimes his lights were on at 3 in the morning. It's not dangerous, someone told me once. Used, intense. Another co-worker leaned closer and whispered, I heard his wife didn't die naturally. That one stuck. When I confronted Ethan about it, he didn't get angry. He didn't deny it aggressively. He just sighed, like a man exhausted by repetition. She was sick, he said. For a long time. People like stories better than the truth. He wanted to believe him. Maybe because I needed to. Maybe because being believed is something we all crave, especially when the world has already decided who we are without asking. Moving in with him felt less like stepping into danger and more like stepping into quiet. The house was clean. Tall clean. Everything organized with precision, not obsession, used control. Like a man who had lost one thing and refused to lose another. The first few weeks were peaceful. Almost healing. Until I met Olivia. She showed up one afternoon while Ethan was at work. I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang, sharp and impatient. She was beautiful in a way that felt intentional. Perfect hair. Soft makeup. Clothes that suggested effort without screaming for attention. You must be Claire, she said, smiling warmly. I'm Olivia. Ethan's friend. Friend is a flexible word. Americans stretch it to cover a lot of territory. She walked through the house like she belonged there. Commented on the furniture. Mentioned memories she and Ethan share. Small things, subtle things, but deliberate. I worry about him, she said casually, sitting on the couch like she'd done it 1,000 times. He gets attached too easily. That was the first time I felt it. That slow, uncomfortable tightening in my chest. Later that night, I asked Ethan about her. She helped me after my wife died, he said. She stayed around longer than she should have. There was something unsaid there, hovering between us. She doesn't like me, I said. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she doesn't like losing control. He laughed it off. He told myself I was being paranoid. That jealousy was my old wound talking. But Olivia didn't leave. She texted Ethan constantly. Dropped by unannounced. Made comments that sounded supportive but felt sharp around the edges. Jure good for him, she told me once, smiling sweetly. For now. For now is never a compliment. He started noticing changes. He smiled once at first. Ethan growing quieter. More guarded. Like he was bracing himself for something. One night, after Olivia left, he sat at the kitchen table long after dinner, staring at nothing. Sis trying to push you out, he said suddenly. He froze. Why would you think that? He looked at me then, eyes steady, voice calm, too calm. Because sis done it before. That was when I realized something important. Ethan wasn't unstable. He was hyper-aware. And Olivia, she wasn't just a jealous friend. She was someone who needed to win. He told myself I could handle it. That I was stronger than whatever quiet war was unfolding under polite smiles and friendly gestures. What I didn't understand yet was this: by choosing to stay, by choosing to believe Ethan when the world labeled him broken, I had unknowingly stepped onto a battlefield where emotions were weapons, truth was flexible, and the person everyone thought was fragile might be the most dangerous mind in the room. And this was only the beginning. Looking back now, I think the hardest part wasn't Olivia herself. It was the way she made everything feel slightly off without ever doing anything that looked openly wrong. That's the kind of person she was. The kind who could ruin your peace, then stand there smiling while you apologized for feeling uneasy. After that night in the kitchen, after Ethan said she had done this before, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Used a quiet click, like a lock turning. He started paying attention. And once you start paying attention, you see everything. Olivia didn't come around every day. That would have been obvious. Instead, she appeared just often enough to stay relevant. Always with an excuse. Always with a reason that sounded reasonable. She brought soup when Ethan had a cold. Dropped off paperwork he might need someday. Stopped by with a memory she just remembered. Every visit carried a reminder. Of history. Of closeness. Of territory. She never raised her voice. Never argued. Never confronted me directly. She didn't have to. She used concern like a blade. You seem tired lately, Clyde, she said once, tilting her head. Living with Ethan can be intense. Another time, while Ethan was in the shower, she leaned in just slightly and whispered, he doesn't handle abandonment well. I hope you know what you're getting into. She said it like a warning. But it felt like a threat. At first, I told myself I was being sensitive. That I was projecting. That grief made people strange and wildly complicated. But the tension in the house kept growing, thin and invisible, like pressure building before a storm. Ethan started sleeping less. He could hear him pacing at night, slow footsteps moving from room to room. Not frantic. Mature. Like a man calculating. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table at 5 a.m., notebook open, coffee untouched. You okay? He asked. He nodded. I'm just thinking. About what? I didn't ask. He already knew. Olivia escalated when she realized subtlety wasn't enough. It started with my job. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office, face carefully neutral, the way managers look when they don't want to accuse you of anything but still need answers. Have you been discussing internal matters with people outside the company? She asked. My stomach dropped. No, I said. Of course not. She hesitated, then slid a printed email across the desk. Anonymous. Vague. Suggestive. Used enough detail to sound credible without being provable. It mentioned me. My stress. My unstable living situation. My relationship with a man who had a history. He didn't need to ask who sent it. When I told Ethan that night, his jaw tightened in a way he'd never seen before. She crossed the line, he said quietly. Something about his tone scared me. Not because it was angry, but because it was controlled. She's trying to isolate you, he continued. If she makes you feel unsafe here, you leave. If you leave, she wins. He wanted to tell him to calm down. Do not overthink it. Do take the high road. Instead, I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. What did she do before? Ethan leaned back, exhaled slowly, then finally said it. She convinced my wife I was losing my mind. The room went quiet. She told her I was obsessive. Unhealthy. Dangerous. She documented everything. My routines. My habits. The way I grieve. My hands went cold. When my wife got sick, he continued, was steady but distant, Olivia was there constantly. Helping. Advising. Planting doubts. He swallowed. And when she died? Ethan looked at me then, eyes sharp, present, painful. She tried to take my life apart piece by piece. My home. My reputation. My sanity. He understood then. Olivia didn't want Ethan. She wanted control over him. And that was an obstacle. That realization lit something inside me. Not fear. Not panic. Anger. A slow, grounded anger that didn't scream or shake. The kind that sharpens you. If Olivia wanted a game, she had picked the wrong woman. He stopped reacting. Stopped flinching. Stopped explaining myself. Instead, I watched. I noticed how Olivia mirrored concern whenever Ethan spoke about stress, how she exaggerated my smallest mistakes, how she collected moments like evidence. He also noticed something else. She underestimated Ethan. And she underestimated me even more. Ethan wasn't fragile. It was methodical. And together, we were very, very patient. We didn't confront her. Not yet. We let her talk. We let her text. We let her think she was winning. Ethan started keeping records. Not obsessively. Cleanly. Dates. Times. Exact phrasing. He did the same. We didn't frame it as revenge. We framed it as clarity. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Olivia made a mistake. She pushed too hard. One evening, she showed up unannounced again, eyes red, voice shaking just enough to look genuine. I'm worried, she said. Ethan scared me today. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Oh. She turned to me, tears ready. He said something, back. About how people get what they deserve. He felt it then. The trap snapping shut. He smiled. That's interesting, I said calmly. Because he was with me all afternoon. Olivia blinked. Used once. But that was enough. Ethan leaned forward. And I recorded our conversation, he added. Because I had a feeling you might try something like this. The color drained from her face. She laughed awkwardly, waved her hand. I think you misunderstood. No, I said. You lied. The room shifted. Power does that when it changes hands. We didn't yell. Didn't accuse wildly. We laid out facts. Timelines. Screenshots. Contradictions. Olivia tried to pivot. To cry. To claim concern. But concern don't leave a paper trail like that. For the first time, she lost control of the narrative. You're both unwell, she snapped finally. You're feeding each other's paranoia. Ethan stood. Calm. Grounded. Certain. You don't get to diagnose us anymore, he said. You don't get access to our lives. She left in silence. No dramatic exit. No slammed door. Just the sound of someone realizing they lost their grip. He thought that would be the end. He was wrong. Olivia didn't disappear. She retaliated. She spread rumors. Quiet ones. Strategic ones. About me. About Ethan. About danger and instability and concern. But this time, we were ready. Ethan filed a formal cease and desist. Clean. Professional. Backed by evidence. He spoke to my employer. Presented documentation. Context. Truth. The whispers stopped. Not because Olivia apologized. But because she no longer had credibility. The final blow came from somewhere unexpected. From Olivia herself. She sent Ethan a message late one night. Lone. Emotional. Unfiltered. She accused him of using me. Of manipulating me. Of replacing her. She called herself the only one who ever truly understood him. And she admitted, without realizing it, that she couldn't stand losing influence over his life. We didn't respond. We didn't need to. That message became the last piece. After that, Olivia faded. Slowly. Quietly. Like someone backing out of a room once the lights are turned on. The house felt lighter. Ethan slept through the night again. And I realized something else, something that surprised me. He hadn't just survived a psychological war. He had changed. He was no longer the woman who apologized for existing. He was no longer afraid of being misunderstood. He had chosen my side. And I had chosen myself. But the story wasn't over yet. Because healing doesn't come before consequences. And closure doesn't come before truth. And everything Olivia set in motion finally came back around, not with cruelty, not with chaos, but with a kind of justice that doesn't scream. It simply arrives. But you don't feel victorious right away. Jujo tiachajota at first that I wanted to believe him. But just Ethan nodded. That's all she knows. Instead of responding emotionally, Ethan did something simple. Something devastating in its calm. He forwarded the message, along with documentation of Olivia's past behavior, to the acquaintance and politely requested no further contact. That was it. No accusation. No explanation. Used boundaries. And boundaries, I learned, are far more powerful than confrontation. That was the moment the narrative fully collapsed. People stopped treating Ethan like a liability and started seeing him as a man who had been managing grief while defending himself from someone who thrived on chaos. And me. I stopped being the woman who moved in with the unstable guy and became just Claire again. A person. Not a rumor. But closure didn't arrive until Olivia finally faced something she couldn't manipulate. Her own reflection. Months later, I heard through someone else that Olivia had tried the same tactics in another situation. Another circle. Another person she claimed to protect. This time, it didn't work. People compared notes. Stories lined up. Patterns emerged. And suddenly, Olivia wasn't the concerned helper anymore. She was the common denominator. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard that. I felt sadness. Because the truth is, people like Olivia don't wake up one day and decide to be villains. They rebuild slowly, through insecurity, through fear of being irrelevant, through a need to matter at any cost. Understanding that didn't excuse her behavior. But it freed me from carrying anger that was never mine to begin with. The real healing came in smaller moments. Like the day Ethan and I repainted the living room together, laughing when we spilled paint on the floor, arguing about colors that didn't matter. Or the first dinner party we hosted, surrounded by friends who saw us clearly, without suspicion or whispers. Or the night Ethan finally told me the full story of his wife, not as a tragedy, but as a memory filled with love instead of loss. She would have liked you, he said quietly. You were steady. That word stayed with me. Steady. Not dramatic. Not perfect. Used steady. He realized then how much I had changed. He was no longer drawn to chaos disguised as concern. I no longer confused intensity with depth. I no longer felt the need to explain my choices to people who weren't living my life. Choosing Ethan hadn't been about saving him. It had been about seeing him clearly when others refused to look past a label. And in doing that, I had learned to see myself clearly too. There was one last moment, months later, that felt like a quiet full circle. I ran into Olivia at a grocery store. No dramatic music. No confrontation. Used two women standing in the same aisle, reaching for the same box of cereal. She froze when she saw me. I didn't. I smiled politely and stepped back. You go ahead, I said. She searched my face, maybe for anger, maybe for triumph, maybe for something she could use. There was nothing there. Used peace. She nodded awkwardly and walked away. And that was it. No final words. No revenge speech. No cinematic ending. Used the understanding that not every story ends with punishment. So may end with release. Ethan and I didn't build a perfect life after that. We built a real one. With disagreements that didn't turn into wars. With trust that didn't require surveillance. With love that didn't demand ownership. And maybe that's the most satisfying ending of all. Because the best revenge isn't destruction. It's freedom. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you were labeled, misunderstood, quietly undermined by someone who smiled while doing it, I want you to know something. You're not crazy for feeling it. You're not weak for staying calm. And you're not wrong for choosing peace over proving a point. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is stepping out of the game entirely. Thank you for staying with me through this story, all the way to the end. If this resonated with you, if you've lived something similar, or if you see pieces of yourself in this journey, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment. Share your perspective. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you're still healing, take your time. You're allowed to arrive at peace slowly. Thank you for listening.